The community center on Elm Street had always been more than just a building. For generations, its walls reverberated with the echoes of children's laughter, impromptu jam sessions, and the eager scuffling of dancers' feet. The wooden floors bore their share of scratches from years of recitals and performances, while the multicolored walls told silent stories through murals painted by teenagers with big dreams. Its corridors were a convergence of cultures, a place where neighbors from every walk of life came together to share traditions and talents. Now, though, with funding dried up and interest from city officials waning, the center was to close at the end of the week. By tomorrow morning, the place would be locked for good. Staff had resigned themselves to the loss, many having already found new jobs in nearby towns or taken up different lines of work. A desperate hush had settled over its once lively rooms, and a single caretaker was left to oversee the final hours. Richard Davis, known affectionately by everyone as Mr. D, was the heart and soul of the community center. He had taken the job nearly 3 decades ago, full of visions for what the venue could become. Over the years, he had witnessed unstoppable creativity, from a child's first piano piece to a retiree's reintroduction to oil painting after a lifetime away from the canvas. Mr. D had made it his mission to foster each and every person's artistic spark. He knew how to rig up a makeshift stage in the gym when schedules overlapped, and he was adept at quickly ordering pizza for events that had double the expected turnout. His silver hair and half-moon spectacles now served as a crest of authority and comfort. With him around, everything felt taken care of. But as the day wore on, Mr. D felt restless. He couldn't accept that this wonderful place would fade away without one last celebration, one last hurrah to honor all the memories forged inside these walls. So, drumming his fingers against the old oak reception desk, he began texting, calling, and emailing everyone he could think of, young and old, professionals and amateurs, teachers and students who once called the center their second home. Perhaps it was short notice, and perhaps it was more a nostalgic whim than a practical plan, but he felt compelled to try. If he could manage to gather everyone for just one night, they could transform these final hours into something that would echo far beyond the building's closure. To his astonished delight, the responses poured in. People replied they would love to swing by, do a small performance, or set up an easel. Local musicians said they'd bring their instruments, families offered to cater potluck style, and a handful of visual artists hinted they might set up a spontaneous gallery. Even older folks from the retirement community who hadn't ventured out after dark in years decided they might make an exception. The local high school jazz band, the old theater club, and even the breakdancing teens from 2 blocks away offered to show up. With his heart pounding against his chest, Mr. D realized something magical was about to unfold. He posted a quick announcement on social media and taped up a few sheets of colorful paper around town, each bearing the same words. Farewell, celebration, tonight at Elm Street Community Center, everyone welcome. That evening, a sprawling crowd began gathering long before the sun dipped below the horizon. Parents arrived with toddlers in strollers, while seniors clutched canes and offered fond recollections of the center's heyday. Couples, teenagers, singles, and entire families trickled in, the front steps soon becoming a hub of excited chatter. People filled the foyer, which used to hold the front desk and a small lounge area, carrying instruments wrapped in worn velvet cases and canvases fresh with half-finished paintings. A medley of laughter, greetings, and squeaking shoes bounced off the high ceilings. Mr. D found himself rushing from one corner to the next, caught in a flurry of warm welcomes. Linda, the choir teacher who had taught free singing lessons on Saturdays, rushed in with her arms full of sheet music, exclaiming she'd round up anyone who might be willing to sing. Marco, a local DJ infamous for turning grade school carnivals into energetic dance floors, hauled in heavy speakers. Kalila, head of the local youth dance troupe, arrived with a small army of young dancers in matching t-shirts and track pants. "Mr. D, you look stressed," she teased, offering him a reassuring pep talk. "Relax, we've got this." He nodded gratefully and moved on to greet Trevor, a high school student who used to dabble in painting and graffiti art. Trevor gave a shy nod of acknowledgement, and behind him stood a group of painter friends, arms burdened with easels, palette knives, and bulging brushes. Mr. D happily directed them toward a corner where they could set up an instant gallery. His intention was for the entire building to be a living showcase of the community's vibrancy. It wasn't just the interior teeming with life. Even the front lawn had turned into a carnival of activity. Families laid out blankets and set up folding chairs, chatting among themselves. Local artisans sold small crafts on makeshift tables. A swirl of excitement grew as a group of drummers began practicing rhythms. The staccato beats drifting through the open door provided an undercurrent of anticipation that made the hairs on people's arms stand taut. It was as though the center's final night was forging an atmosphere none of them had witnessed here nor anywhere before. At 7 p.m. sharp, Mr. D climbed onto a small platform in the main rec hall. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, and the large crowd hushed. He scanned faces, both familiar and unfamiliar. Neighbors who had grown up, families who had once been new to the area, and artists who'd proudly worn the center's name on their resumes. Clearing his throat, his eyes glistened. "Friends," he began, voice wavering slightly. "Welcome to the Elm Street Community Center's final night. I'm honored you've all come to celebrate what this place has meant to our community. It's heartbreaking that these doors will close, but I wanted tonight to be a testament to our collective spirit. So let's fill these halls with music, art, and dance one last time. Thank you all for being here." A potent ripple of applause and hollers filled the space. Slowly, conversations resumed, more animated than before. People roamed from one area to another, uncertain where to start, with so much to see and do. The breakdancers from the next neighborhood over huddled in the corner of the gym, practicing moves beneath fluorescent lights. The older couples toured the painted canvases set up in the hall, exclaiming at the swirling colors and youthful depictions of city life. From the corner near the concession stand, the smell of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls and aromatic samosas drifted. The local deli and the Mendez family were handing out bite-sized snacks. All donations, they said, would go to keep some local youth arts programs afloat wherever they might find a new home. Amid the glow of it all, the high school jazz band began setting up near the stage. Mr. D smiled, recalling how a decade ago, the clumsy middle school version of that very band had squeaked out their first brassy chords. Now they had developed a polished sound and a loyal local following. The saxophonist tested his mouthpiece with a simple scale that echoed sweetly across the high ceiling. The drummer adjusted her cymbals, and the trumpets quietly tuned. When they were ready, the bandleader, a diminutive teenage girl with a giant presence, counted them off. The horns kicked in, their bright notes cascading through the air. The mellow, upright bass provided depth, while the drummer's rhythm gave the entire song an irresistible swing. Couples took each other by the hand and began dancing in improvised steps, caught up in the band's spirit. Applause roared when they finished. Shortly after, Linda's choir found their way onto the stage, ushering in a new wave of harmonious voices, some deep and resonant, others soaring in sweet soprano. Their rendition of a classic show tune rang out with surprising professionalism. Children on the steps of the stage clapped in time, enthralled by the exhilarating combination of sound, color, and movement. From moment to moment, the scene changed. Marco, the DJ, pumped up lively beats in the annex, where people hungry for modern pop, hip-hop, and disco gathered to dance. In a side hallway, the local Poets Society formed a cozy circle with fold-up chairs. There, a few folks recited heartfelt poems about the center verses that touched on shared memories, triumphs, and heartbreak. A hush fell whenever each poet took a breath, every syllable celebrated by enthusiastic applause. Occasionally, the quiet reading was punctuated by the excited shrieks of kids engaged in a painting station just around the corner. Yet it all worked seamlessly, coexisting with remarkable harmony. Still, Mr. D sensed the night building toward something that had yet to happen. A feeling of unity was in the air, but it needed a final focal point, something to capture the spirit of this place in one culminating moment. Then he remembered a time years ago when the center had hosted a collaborative show, a variety act featuring performers of different styles. It had been chaotic, bizarre, and absolutely riveting. The success rested on the fact that everyone was aware they were part of something bigger than themselves. That's when a bold idea cemented in his mind. an impromptu jam session that would combine all the elements swirling around them: drums, piano, horns, possibly even the dancers' routines and the poets' lyrical recitations. If they could pull this off, it would be a farewell truly worthy of the center's legacy. He approached the high school jazz band's lead saxophonist and whispered his plan in her ear. Her face lit up in excitement. Next, he sought out the breakdancing crew's leader, a lanky teenager named Terrence, explaining how the dancers could freestyle over the music. Terrence's eyes sparkled with anticipation, and he agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, Linda's choir was warming up from another choral piece, so Mr. D slipped over to them and extended an invitation. Would you all be willing to lend your voices to one giant final song? She beamed. Absolutely. As more people heard about the collaborative performance, enthusiastic nods spread through the crowd. Somebody ran to track down the visiting salsa players who had come from a nearby block. The seniors in the poetry circle waited for an invitation to weave in a verse or two, and were delighted to hear they'd have the chance. Even the local folks who had never considered themselves artists or performers lingered nearby, the promise of an unrepeatable occasion giving them the courage to hover at the edges. Around 9:00 p.m., Mr. D hopped back onto the small stage, beckoning for the microphones to be set up. The hush that followed was electric, everyone anticipating what might come next. The band arranged themselves in a semicircle, a mix of the jazz ensemble plus a few local brass players who had found spots for their trombones and trumpets. The drummers, both local and from the visiting groups, stationed themselves in the back. Linda's choir lined up on the right side of the stage, standing tall and proud. Kalila gathered her dancers along the front, while Terrence's breakdancing crew flanked the opposite side. Meanwhile, a handful of string players, an impromptu mini orchestra made of local violinists and one cellist, quietly set up chairs near the back corner. Mr. D, center stage, cleared his throat. This has been the most incredible evening, he said, scanning the crowd that now filled the entire gym. Some people were standing on chairs to see, others leaned along the walls, while the children sat cross-legged at the front, wide-eyed. We're about to try something that may be messy, unpolished, and perhaps ridiculous. But I think that's the spirit of art sometimes. Let's call this the Elm Street Fanfare. He raised a hand to the band and started counting down with his fingers in the air. 3, 2, 1. The drummer tapped out a slow beat, joined by a sax riff that soared sweetly. Then, gradually, the other wind instruments joined in, weaving a warm, bright tapestry of sound. The choir began with long choral harmonies that glided through the auditorium, adding an ethereal quality. Kalila signaled her dancers, and they stepped in sync. Terrence's breakdancers took center stage momentarily, spinning on the floor. And then one of the older poets emerged from the side, reciting a short verse that soared above it all. Within these walls, our dreams took flight, a tapestry of sound and paint and light. Though doors may close, we hold the key. Our shared humanity sets us free. The entire hall erupted in applause, but the music pressed on, determined to keep pace. A trumpet soared into a solo, hands clapped spontaneously, and the choir's crescendo folded the entire hall into a single collective breath. Everyone present, whether performing or spectating, felt their hearts thrum with an emotion that went beyond simple entertainment. They were part of a moment that future generations might not experience, yet would live on in memories and stories. As the music continued to swell, some of the audience members joined in, dancing at the edges. A father lifted his child to see over the heads in front of them, letting the child wave a small glow stick in the air. Elderly couples swayed in corners, arm in arm, tears in some eyes, for all that the center had meant to them. Photographers who had come to capture the event snapped photo after photo, and it seemed each angle told a rich story. Children enthralled by the passionate musicians, dancers lost in the music, neighbors hugging neighbors they hadn't spoken to in years. The synergy of creative energy was mesmerizing. After about 10 minutes of a jubilant mix of solos, dance breaks, and choral interludes, Mr. D raised both arms to gently bring the piece to a close. It ended with a final resonant chord from the brass section, a flourish of the drums, and a capstone note from the choir. The entire gym erupted. The thunderous applause was more than just a reaction to the performance. It was an expression of unity and love. Some people whistled and stamped their feet. Others stood silently, tears reflecting in their eyes, soaking in the gravity of the moment. In the aftermath, voices came fast and loud, brimming with joy. People poured out into the foyer and adjoining rooms, continuing to talk about what had just happened, some describing it as unreal or truly unforgettable. Children drifted off to snack tables while the new wave of visitors arrived, attracted by the noise and the social media posts that had been spreading the word all evening. It felt as though the community center was alive again, if only for one night. A couple of hours remained before midnight, and Mr. D saw no reason to send anyone home yet. With a renewed sense of purpose, he and a few volunteers made sure that no corner of the center went unused. Long after the jam session, smaller pockets of creative expression broke out. A group of mothers sat in the old library corner, singing lullabies in Spanish and English to their dozing children. A few young men did freestyle rap in the hallway, improvising lines about unity and hope. The well-loved upright piano in the corner found an eager audience as a teenage girl played a soulful rendition of a classical piece her grandmother used to practice. Everyone seemed determined to claim their last memories in this space, each moment shining with a poignancy you only feel when time is short. To keep the night rolling, the potluck tables needed replenishing. More trays of food arrived in an almost miraculous fashion, as the word had spread to every local kitchen. The sweet smell of brownies and fresh coffee filled even the darkest corners. When Mr. D drifted toward the snack area, a longtime volunteer, Sharon, offered him a warm cup of tea. "You've done something incredible tonight," she said, her eyes bright with gratitude. "You gave us the chance to say goodbye the right way." He accepted the cup with a trembling hand. "I just set the stage," he replied with a modest shrug. "The rest was you. Everyone." Even so, he felt an immense sense of pride and relief. The center's final curtain call had become a gift to its people, perhaps more meaningful than the sum of all the experiences that had come before. Time had not defeated them. Circumstance had not stolen away the one thing that truly mattered: community. As midnight neared, Mr. D realized he hadn't paused to look around in a while. He took a break from all tasks and found a spot in the middle of the hallway, letting his eyes travel across the scene. The stage in the main hall was now empty, but there was still plenty of buzz in every corner. A few leftover dancers spun and stepped in the gym, some folks were quietly cleaning up trash and stacking chairs, and many participants, especially those with small children, had said their goodbyes and trickled out. The crowd had dwindled, but the warmth remained. In a moment of reflection, he walked the length of the corridors, brushing his hand gently along the murals, feeling their raised paint. Those images covered everything from community harvest festivals to portraits of achievements and festivals from the past. He passed by the door of an old arts and crafts room, remembering the chaos of summer day camp kids, glitter on the floor, crayons scattered everywhere, their shrieks mixing with off-key singing. How precious it all felt now. Eventually, the last of the volunteers were wrapping up. The potluck tables were stripped down to foil trays of half-eaten pies, cookies, and fruit salad. The final group of stragglers said their farewells to each other, sharing lingering hugs and phone numbers. One by one, people trickled into the cool night air. A hush settled again, but it felt different, a hush of accomplishment rather than defeat. The lights clicked off in the smaller side rooms, their darkness a marker of final closure. That left only Mr. D and a handful of core folks, Kaila, Terrence, and a few from the dance crew. Linda, the choir teacher, and Trevor with his graffiti paint still speckling his sleeves. They gathered in the lobby, taking a collective breath. The hour was late, and exhaustion bound them together. But so did the stubborn glow of euphoria. Kalila was the first to speak. "I used to practice here until midnight as a teenager, you know," she said wistfully. "I'd dance until my feet ached, dreaming of ways to stage a big show someday. Tonight felt like that dream to create something special with everyone." Terrence nodded. I wasn't sure if it'd be a fail, but actually it was epic, he said, exchanging a high five with one of his fellow breakers. Linda clasped Mr. D's hand in hers. I don't know what's coming next for these kids I teach, but I'm so grateful they got the chance to sing in a space that's meant so much to us. Thank you. Trevor took a moment before joining in, stepping closer with eyes full of determination. I, uh, realized people might consider me a graffiti artist, but it was here that I learned painting was actually legit. I never really thanked you, Mr. D, for letting me paint that big mural on the side of the building. The butterfly wings, it's the best thing I've done. Mr. D responded gently. You're all going to keep creating beauty wherever you go. This building was just the starting point. I have no doubt you'll find other places, even corners of the streets, to share your gifts. The community center may be locked up tomorrow, but the spirit you've all fostered will keep living and growing. Tears that he'd held back most of the evening started to glisten at the corners of his eyes. He let them flow, unabashed, and a wave of catharsis rippled through the group. They leaned into a final group hug, their breathing synchronic as the magnitude of the night overwhelmed them one last time. At last, they exited into the crisp midnight air. Stars speckled the sky above, twinkling faintly, as if winking in approval. Mr. D clicked off the lights and locked the front door of the community center. Yes, for the last time, but with a sense of peace rather than despair. He set the keys gently in his coat pocket, exhaling a long breath. Tomorrow, city officials would finalize the closure and presumably board up the building. That knowledge should have weighed heavily on him, yet at this moment he felt weightless. A soft breeze stirred the trees lining Elm Street. The final few people mingled outside, reluctant to leave the place they had just breathed so much life into. With heartfelt goodbyes, they dispersed, heading off into the night to their homes, their cars, their next chapters. Mr. D lingered, letting his gaze roam over the building's weathered facade. Behind those walls lay immeasurable echoes of music, laughter, arguments, confessions, triumphs. And from this night onward, the memory of a final celebration unlike any other. He took one last look at the sign above the entrance, Elm Street Community Center. The paint was chipping, the letters a bit crooked from years of wear. But that no longer mattered. The center's significance had never been about how it looked. It was about the community that breathed life into it. In one night, they had given it the send-off it deserved, shining their light in every dark corner one final time. Mr. D stood there until the quiet became absolute. He inhaled deeply, rubbing a tear off his cheek, and felt the faintest beginnings of a smile. Tonight they had proven that art and unity could not be locked behind doors. The night's music, color, and kinship would carry on in hearts and minds, forever immune to any closure. And though the curtain fell on that stage, the performance would continue in the spirit of neighbors and friends determined to keep creating together no matter where life led them next. As he walked away, Mr. D felt certain that the legacy born within those walls would light 1,000 new stages in the days, months, and years to come.